Hi guys! Today I've got another layout and process video to share with you that features a design made with 6x6 inch papers. For this layout, I've got this large background made up of hearts in several different sizes from teeny tiny to large. When designing with 6x6 inch papers, a concept I use often, and if you've watched any of my other videos, you've heard me talk about it before, and that is the concept of finding ways to use smaller shapes or strips or squares grouped together to create a larger design. And that's not a singular concept. There are many ways you can adapt and play around with that idea. It can be covering a large shape with smaller pieces, or grouping strips together to create a 12x6 inch background, or creating a grid of shapes or a frame of squares around a photo. There are tons of ways you can build large designs with smaller pieces. For this layout, it's more of a randomized background using the same shape in 5 different sizes. I've used all of these smaller pieces to cover a large area and create this background design. Because the background design is not meant to be a perfect shape like a square or a circle, it made this really easy to put together. To begin, I used 4 different sizes of heart punches to punch out several hearts in 9 different pattern papers. With a design like this, you can use as many or as few colors and patterns as you want. It's an easy design to adjust to what you have or what you want to use. I don't really have a specific shape in mind for this background, and I'm going to just start laying the pieces out and adjusting as I go. I'm not using adhesive just yet because I want to make sure I'm happy with the placement of everything first. Whenever I'm creating a cluster or grouping of shapes, I always start with the larger pieces first and then build around that. I like to group in order from large to small. When I'm happy with the larger heart placement, I start adding the hearts in the next size down, continuing to fill in this design. For this base layer of hearts, I'm not overlapping any of them. I just want to create a flat layer that I can add other dimensional details to later. When I have that second size of hearts added, I move on to the third size, again using them to fill in the design. For these, they are small enough that I can start filling in some smaller gaps between the 2 larger sizes. And like I said earlier, this design was not really pre-planned, so I'm often moving the hearts around or adding in more of the larger hearts or medium hearts until I'm happy with the arrangement of it all. After the third size of hearts are added, I start in with the smallest size. These are really good for filling in the gaps. I also like using the smaller hearts to add a little detail to the outer edge of the grouping. I didn't punch out enough hearts the first time, so I go back and punch out a few more. I decided to use some different patterns this time too. I liked the spread of color and pattern I had already in the background design, so I thought bringing some different patterns would be a good way to finish it out. With designs like this, there are 3 details I try to pay attention to have balance within this background. The first is to have an even spread of color. The second is to have an even spread of pattern. And the third is to have an even spread of sizes of hearts. Now, I don't mean that they have to be perfectly equal. I just look to achieve that spread as much as I can. Not really looking for perfection in those areas, just paying close enough attention so that I don't have a large grouping of one color on the left or 7 dotted patterns altogether. I want this look to work together to create a bigger picture, and having balance in that design is super helpful in achieving that. Once I am happy with the arrangement, I start adhering the hearts down. This first base layer of hearts are all adhered flat I'm not really worried about them being perfectly spaced apart either. There are some areas that have larger gaps between them, and I'm going to fill in some of those gaps later. The main thing I'm paying attention to while adhering is that the hearts are straight. With the base layer of hearts complete, I can now add my photos. I'm using my ruler to help me make sure they are centered between the left and right edges. Now I'm going to start adding some of that dimension to the base layer with some hand stitch borders on a few hearts. To begin, I have to pierce the holes for my stitching. With hearts, I start by piercing the bottom point and the top point and then fill in the rest. To me, that's the easiest way to make sure your spacing for those points meets up correctly. I'm going to stitch on all of the large hearts and then some of the 2 medium sizes. Just like the balance of color, pattern, and size within this design, I want the same for the stitching. I want to have a nice balance of it across the layout. To stitch, I use a back stitch. If you have never stitched on a layout before, I have a video that shows my process and I'll link to it in the comments below. It might be helpful if you are just starting out. So I chose to use a coordinating color of thread for each color of heart for a tone-on-tone look. This does make the stitching process of this design much longer because you'll stitch a few hearts and then have to change the color of the thread. It really does add extra time to that stitching process. If you want to simplify, you could use a single color for all hearts, and that would really cut down the time on that stitching. While I had my stitching supplies out, I went ahead and added some stitching to a few punched hearts. I want to add these with foam adhesive, so I will add the stitching to them first, then adhere them. If you want something to be flat, you stitch after you adhere. If you want something to be popped up a little, you stitch before you adhere. Now I'm going to add my title and journaling. For my title, I'm using a cluster of different words and phrases. I used the word sweet along with a hashtag selfie speech bubble for my main title. Then I added a love you bunches banner piece below that. For my journaling, what you see here is a little different than the finished layout. After I had completed the layout, I went back and added a small pink mat to the journaling just to help it stand out a little more. The next detail I'm going to add are little word and phrase speech bubbles. I'm just kind of randomly placing them throughout the heart background. A few of them I adhered with foam adhesive and some are flat and slightly tucked under hearts. I can't ever seem to complete a layout without adding some word and phrase stickers, so of course I'm going to add some to this design. I'm placing them on the edges of the speech bubbles, and then I added one with my title pieces. To complete the layout, I'm going to add a few finishing touches. The first is I'm going to punch some teeny tiny gold glitter hearts and add them to the larger gaps and around some of the edges. And I've got to mention how awesome this glitter paper is. It's a 6x6 paper pad from Die Cuts with a View. And if you like glitter but hate the mess, you will seriously love this paper. It doesn't shed a single bit and it works really well with punches. Plus, it's such a beautiful fine glitter and super sparkly. It's really a worthy purchase. If we have them in stock at scrapbookgeneration.com, I'll link to them down below. You'll definitely want to grab one or two, or maybe three. The last detail I'm adding are more of those smaller punched hearts. I wanted to add a few with foam adhesive to add a little more dimension to this design. And that completes my layout. For as detailed as this layout is, it really did come together quickly. If you skip the stitching, it would take no time at all to create this. It always seems that the layouts I create with 6x6 paper pads always come together faster. If you are interested in using 6x6 papers on full-size layouts, but you don't know where to start, I have tons of 6x6 sketches and classes and PDFs on how to design with them that could be super helpful in getting you started. I'll link to several of them down below if you are interested, or if you just like using sketches to save some time, they are good for that too. Combining sketches and 6x6 paper pads together, you can really make some quick pages that way. So that's it for today. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.